Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Human Factor Security Podcast with me, your host, Jenny Radcliffe, the People Hacker. I am so excited to be finally interviewing, because we've sort of known each other a little while and not managed to kind of do this before. Ted Harrington, who is executive partner at the ISE, so the Independent Security Evaluators, but is also an entrepreneur and an author, and it's Ted's book that I want to talk to him most about today. Welcome to the show, Ted.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm so psyched to be here, Jenny.
Do you know what? I was so excited to get you on the show and to talk to you properly, because it's one of those things in this industry. It was a name and a face that I knew quite well, and we'd even sort of done things where I kind of left and then you come on the show, so on other people's shows and other platforms. So I was so chuffed to have you on. Do you want to just tell people a little bit more about what you do at the moment, and then we'll get into like your career and the book a little bit?
Sure. Well, what I do at the moment is not leave my house too much with quarantine and all. Yeah, so we're the good guy hackers. And I have as you mentioned, ISE is a consulting company I'm a partner in, and essentially how we pay the bills is companies hire us to help them find their vulnerabilities in their software systems by actually performing ethical hacking and then tell them how to fix it. And yeah, and that's what our consulting business is. All the stories from my book, or most of the stories from my book, come directly from that experience. Like, here's what we saw this company experience, and here's how it went well, or here's how it didn't go well, and that's what I speak about on stages. And so that's sort of how I spend most of my time, is helping companies think about how to do security better.
And did you always want to get into the business? Were you always a technical person?
I always knew that what I wanted to do were a few things. I wanted to do things that were hard, that matter, that help other people, and that require you to get better every day. Those are sort of the four defining principles of my life. And it wasn't until going on almost about 10 years ago that I realized that security was where I was going to be able to scratch all four of those itches. So other, prior points in my life, different types of technology that I was working on, they maybe helped me achieve some of those things. But it wasn't until I sort of landed on the problem set that security addresses, I was like, I'm home. And it's this is where I'll be forever.
And where did you work? Where was your first kind of role in security? What was your first job?
So about a little over 9 years ago, I linked up with who's now my business partner, a guy named Steve Bono. And Steve had started ISE, this company that I'm partnering now. He started a few years prior to that out of the PhD program at Johns Hopkins. And they had started out of this piece of security research where they literally hacked a car, which is like such a cool, amazing piece of research. And I mean, literally their proof of concept is them in this like empty parking lot with a weaponized software radio saying, we're going to start the car now. And they start the car.
I love the car hacking gang. it's cool.
It's such a cool thing to say. Yeah, I agree with you for sure. And so then a few years after starting that company, Steve bought out his co-founders and he wanted to sort of reimagine the business. And that's when he and I met, and we said, okay, well, here's what we could do with the business. And we sort of reimagined how to think about growing its scale, impact, and influence. And so that was really how I got started, was saying, hey, let's take this company that had done some cool things, but let's make it really expand the impact. And that's what I've been working on the past several years.
Well, I just, we're going to get onto some of this now. I'm dying to just get straight into the book, and then we can hear some of these stories for ourselves, because as someone who's a speaker and who deals with the human side of things myself, I love someone who can tell a good story, and you really do it well in this book. So I have to admit, I was reading this and I thought, oh God, Ted's a technical guy. So this is the book. We're going to obviously put, look, this, you can see I've got my background. It's Hackable. And it's available in the UK. Now, look, I can't, obviously we'll flash up some links and everything to it. It's on Amazon and all the rest of it. And but for me, it's got here, Attackable, Ted Harrington, how to do application security right. And I was thinking, oh God, Ted's a skilled guy, and this is going to be really, really technical. And do you know what? The thing is, I wasn't expecting something I mean, I knew it'd be great because you'd written it, but I wasn't expecting something so readable.
Oh, that's a great compliment. I
I
appreciate
really
that.
like it. Really is easy to read. So I mean, I just, I think that's a great achievement for someone to turn something that is essentially a lot about a technical side of things, but make it something that someone like me, who isn't really particularly technical, is able to read. So if I just want to get into it, but did you say I've got to make this as approachable as possible? This is not just a sort of a textbook for app developers or whatever. Was that a goal of yours?
Absolutely. Yeah. When I set out to write this book, and I can elaborate on what motivated me to write the book and what I wanted to achieve with it in a minute. But once I determined why I wanted to write this book, was I really wanted to help people. The immediate barrier to that is, well, how do you make it accessible? You nailed it, right? This is hugely technical topic area.
Mm-hmm.
It's really complicated. I wrote it because people who do this, who are dealing with software every day, struggle to know how to do this right. How am I going to help people if it's this super dense, hard to read, textbook type thing? And so what I set out to do, there's a couple tricks that I used, or trick sounds malicious. Maybe there's like some tips that I, implemented to try to make it readable. And the big one was this. It was to write the book as if I was talking, like literally sitting across the table from my 13-year-old nephew.
Mm-hmm.
He's a smart, curious kid, but he certainly doesn't know any of the corporate jargon. He doesn't know any of the concepts. He definitely doesn't know any of the vocabulary, but he's smart enough to understand ideas. Yeah. And so that was sort of my North Star as I'm writing this thing, is to say, if I'm explaining this to him, this idea, will he get it? And that's where you identify the things that make things hard to read, the assumptions you make, the times you might use, not you, but that one makes, or the time that one, is using acronyms when it's like, you should probably describe what that means, or making assumptions about how things work. And it's really meaningful to me to hear you say it was so approachable, because that was exactly the goal. Because I know this is hard enough as it is. I wanted to make it easier.
One of the cool things in this book, guys, is that Ted starts every chapter with a lie and then a truth. And you say, the lie is that security is a headache. But the truth is, security can be and is, if you've done it right, a competitive advantage.
Yeah, that's one of the actually overarching themes of the book for sure. Is I really want to help people really think about security differently. Because if you think about it differently, and not just think about it differently for the sake of thinking differently, but think about it differently in terms of the sake of thinking about it appropriately, that reshaping of the mindset directly leads to the ability to succeed, because it helps you figure out, how do you justify budget? How do you justify allocation of effort and time and other types of resources? And I make the case, and how I arrived at that, I sort of backed into what is the competitive advantage, because that's one of the benefits of writing a book, right? You have to really spend a lot of time thinking about the ideas that sort of seem innate to you. And one of those ideas I started thinking about was, I'm like, why do our customers hire us? They spend a lot of money on us. And why do they do that? Now, I'm a security guy. You're a security gal. We believe, of course, I shouldn't speak for your beliefs, but I'm going to make an assumption that you believe that security is worth doing inherently. It's a good thing to do. It's the right thing to do. It's like, I always use the comparison, someone, your neighbor trips and falls. You don't even think about it. You just go and help your neighbor back up, because it's the right thing to do. You're not expecting compensation for that.
No.
And I think security is in the same vein, where it's the right thing to do. But our customers don't pay us these big bucks because it's the right thing to do. A lot of them, that's like, and also it's the right thing to do. That it's more like that. And I realized that what they're all trying to do, they're trying to achieve a business benefit. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to prove to their customers that, hey, our software is secure. You can work with us. You can trust us. And maybe our competitors' stuff isn't as secure. And once I realized that became, once I realized that motivation, that became a key thing that I wanted to make this book advocate for, that first do security right. And then once you do it right, you can actually use it as a competitive advantage.
There's a huge business case for being a really secure company was Secure Tech. That's what I thought you were saying on the insurance bit. Would that be about right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, as you know, no, security is not like insurance. That is the literal first sentence of the first chapter, because I hear it so often, as you know, as you do too, and I totally understand why people think that. It's a natural inclination to be like, it's this thing that, like, I guess takes care of if a bad thing happens later, and it's like that attitude is the problem that we want to address and say, no, because that is true about insurance. That insurance, I mean, there's some insurance that maybe delivers benefit throughout the process, but mostly insurance is like bad thing happens, insurance kicks in, and you get a good thing. But security is more like fitness, where it's like throughout the entire process of becoming fit, you're getting better, you're looking better you're becoming attractive to the people in the community. You join a community of enthusiasts. Obviously your life is just better in so many physical and mental health ways. And that's more what security is like. It's a journey and a process of improving. And that's a big part of helping people sort of reshape the way we think about security, that it's this positive thing. It's not this like, oh, I got to do this thing again. And like, how do I do as little of it as possible? If you thought about your fitness that way, if you're like, fine, I'll do one push-up today, you are never going to become fit. It's just not going to happen. You have to have more of a like,
But there was this other quote that you said, and this was very near the front of the book. And you said that we're sort of in an industry where success, and you say success is often measured by we just didn't get hacked yet. And I was told, I do another talk show, I do a live chat show on Tuesdays, and this week's topic was mental health and burnout and stress and everything. And I thought, we didn't get hacked yet. That's not good enough, is it? Because again, it's all focused on the negative, and none of it about building something that's sellable and it's competitive and kind of wonderful. And I just wondered about that one as well. That is so true. We didn't get hacked yet. It's not the way we should be measuring the success of this thing, is it really?
No, I don't think that's how we should be measuring it. In fact, I don't even think that's a measurement, because you're measuring the absence of a negative. And there's only two conditions. It's either the negative is absent or the negative is present. And if the negative is present, you're like, well, did we succeed? And if the negative is absent, we haven't been hacked yet. Does that mean what we're doing works? And how does that help? So I don't think that's a good way to measure success. The common way that people measure success in security is by trying to compute the reduction of risk. And they're like, well, it's, maybe 10% likely, and it's a $10 million impact if it happens. So that means this is $1 million risk. So let's spend less than $1 million or whatever. And that I also feel is, while I think that is important and that part needs to stay, I still don't think that's the great way to think about it. That's still the sort of, how do we minimize this attitude? And instead we should say, well, how do we create something great? And I truly believe that in security, what we're doing is we're helping companies achieve great things. I mean, like, people ask me all the time, they say, well, what's your job? What do you do? And they're like, you reduce risk, right? And I'm like, well, yeah. They're like, well, you guys, your company, you hack systems, right? And we're like, yeah. And they're like, but what's that reaction? What do you really do? And I say, well, what I do, my job is to empower innovation. It's to allow companies who are doing these awesome things actually be able to do that thing, and not let security be the thing that stops it. That's my job, is to take the person who's changing the world and enable them to change the world.
You really did that, because the story with the iPhone, which I'll let you tell, but that was the case of, that was innovation led, and then it was sort of a retrofit thing in a way, I suppose. But that was enabling them to get better, wasn't it? Do you want to tell the story, Ted? Because it's such a great story.
We were the first company to hack the iPhone. Yeah. I can. There's a New York Times headline out there that I can send you. I was in, like, everyone. It was in USA Today. It was everywhere. But when the iPhone was first coming out, if we can all sort of think back to that moment in time, that was pretty cool, right? The world was about to change. This amazing experience in your pocket. And of course, we're wired a little differently. And so we're like, we want one because it's awesome, but we also want one because we want to hack it.
We want to break it.
Yeah, we just want to rip it apart. Unfortunately, we had, those of us that were part of our research team at ISE, didn't have access to the device, an early release version of the device. And every other security researcher, maybe not every researcher, but there were many other researchers who also wanted to be first. And so what the team wound up doing was building out some hypothetical scenarios and saying, okay, well, since we can't get an advantage and we don't want it to just be like a level playing field, we need to create an advantage is what we wanted to do. And so we worked on this, the research team worked on this theory that as the iPhone was porting from a desktop operating system to a mobile operating system, in that sort of rush to hit that deadline, which is very common for companies, they have, you know, a deadline they have to hit, that maybe something might get ported over, maybe an issue that's already known to exist that hadn't yet gotten resolved. And if that happened, could we build exploit scenarios around that? And so that's what the team did. They built a few exploit scenarios around if something got ported over. And sure enough, a buffer overflow vulnerability got ported over. And the exploit scenario was able to very quickly be demonstrated as a viable attack method. And it meant that any attacker from anywhere in the world could take over the device. I mean, full administrative control, operate the microphone, take pictures, send text messages, delete photos. We proved concept, the research team proved concept by actually taking over the phone of a New York Times reporter as it sat at his desk in New York from our lab in Baltimore. He was part of it. This was like part of the story.
Yes, it was fine. He was part of it. Yes.
He wasn't like, what's happening now? And so it was pretty cool. But the story, that's not quite the end of the story, because even though from a researcher's perspective, that might be perceived as the end of the story, like I did it, right? But that's the purpose of research. The purpose of all of security is to make things better. So once we had identified the problem, it would be inappropriate for us to stop there. So then what we did, the research team put together an advisory and sent it to Apple and said, here's the issue. Here's how we exploited it. Here's a recommendation how to fix it. And they did. They went out and it was really fast, maybe 48 hours. They had a patch issued. Problem went away.
The big lesson from this was that Apple took the advice and fixed it really quickly.
Yeah, they weren't super psyched about it when we sent the information in, but they did fix it.
Was this this must have still been in the Steve Jobs days? I mean, did it go all the way up or?
Well, I don't know if it went all the way to Steve Jobs. I would be surprised if it
wasn't. It'd be more Wozniak than Jobs, wouldn't it?
But yeah, it was. Yeah, maybe it went to him. I actually don't know the answer to that.
No,
but you're spot on. The challenge around fixing the problems. I mean, I dedicated a whole chapter to that, and in so many ways, I think that is far more a business problem than it is a technical problem.
Yeah.
And the business problem being, well, I only have so much time for our people to do things, and they are already doing things. And now here's this big pile of additional things they have to do. And that's the way that many businesses look at the results they might get from their security testing. And so I tried to break that down and to say, okay, well, that's a real problem. And I empathize and understand it. But nevertheless, you still need to do something about it. So we need to accept that's difficult and we need to figure out what to do about it. And it's really just this 3-phase process, right? You prioritize by severity, and then you actually fix the issues, which sounds straightforward, but you have to do it. And then you verify, did the fixes work? And the prioritization piece, that first step, that's the key to making it viable, because a lot of people will look at things and they'll say, well, I've got 100 things I got to address now. How am I going to do that in the next 1 or 2 weeks? And so you don't have to. You have to fix the 10% of stuff that's critical right now, and then the next batch of stuff in the next few weeks, and then the next batch of stuff a month after that. And so it helps people think about how to plan.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sort of leads me to one of the key concepts of the book. Really, is that I think part of that is that they don't, I think when we find these issues, in a customer's or in a client's system, is that they wouldn't have seen it that way before, because they don't think like an attacker. And this is one of your key sort of elements of the book, is like, if we think like attackers, then it helps you kind of get that system secure and even design for security. and I thought that was very interesting, and I particularly loved all that about. I mean, there's all sorts of things that I liked about what you said. I mean, certainly the stuff about attack motivations and insider threats and external. I mean, that is almost parallel exactly with what I would say in my training, because it's just true, you know. But yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about that? And I love the fact that you've dabbled in social engineering, thinking like an attacker as well. That was such a nefarious thing to do. Ted doesn't like queuing.
No, lines, they're not. I like lines so that I cannot be in them. But
you have to tell the story now.
Sure. Yeah. So I tell this story about hacking a bar. And it's a social engineering story, but the reason that I tell it in a story, in a book about application security, is because I think the principles become really evident with, it's far less conceptual for people to be like, oh, I've been in a line before. I understand that idea. Oh, I know what a hostess, like a VIP hostess looks like. I can conceptualize that. And this really happened too. The story, I mean, I could have made this story up, but it actually did happen, where I went to this bar and there was, a long line to get in. And then there was a cover charge once you get to the end of that line. And I had to go to that bar. And the reason I believe was because there was a birthday party or something, but it wasn't like, well, you can go to that bar across the street that doesn't have a line. It's like I had to go to this bar. And I didn't want to wait in this long line, didn't want to pay this cover. And so I started applying these same principles that attackers apply. And the first was, of course, have a goal. And my goal was I wanted to go in through the VIP line because there was no line and there's no cover charge. But I didn't have those privileges. So I need to elevate to VIP privilege. So that was my goal. And then the next thing I did, which any attacker will do, is sort of evaluate the system, try to understand how it works. And I identified that there's this VIP hostess, and her job was to verify, is someone on the list? And if they're on the list, they can come in. And so I realized, okay, well, my goal is to get this person to believe I'm on the list that I'm not on. How do I do that?
Yes.
So I approached her and I said, hello, I'm on the list. And of course, it wasn't on the list, but I needed her to give me information that would make her believe. If she gave me the information, then I could associate myself with someone on the list, then she would let me in.
Yeah.
And so when she asked what my name was, because I'm not on the list, telling my name wouldn't help. And guessing is, what would even be the point of guessing? Like, the chances I'm right are so low.
No.
So instead I issued what's called a specially crafted input. And this is the same whether you're talking about social engineering or, attacking a, software system. And the specially crafted input was a leading statement, which said, I'm with the group. I was making an assumption that there was a group on the VIP list. There usually are in these types of situations. And she said, great, which group? Now, again, I'm not on the list. I'm not with the group. I don't know the names of groups. I can't guess. So I issued another specially crafted input and said, I'm with the big one. I figured there would be one group that's larger than others. And could I identify myself with that group? And with that, she flips through a couple pages on her clipboard. And she says, oh, the Smith party? And I said, yes, I'm with the Smith party.
Yes.
And so with that, she opens a velvet rope, escorts me into the bar. And so I achieved my goal.
So I think from a social engineering point of view, there's a couple of things that I'd say there. I'd say, we're talking about evading. So an evading a dodge on a question. So evading, you present another question, which is always good, because what you're not doing is giving her anything really to push against. It's some solicitation. And we'd say, just for anyone who watches this with social engineering tips, accompanied with a nice smile and a nod of the head group. People just fill in. Sorry, you were going to say, and the point being.
Well, I paid my bar tab. I don't know if that was the point or not, but I paid a huge bar tab. So I more than made up for my cover charge.
But I just like that, because you strike me as a straight up kind of guy. And I just loved the way that it was just like, but I couldn't be bothered with that queue. And it's applied, like you say, what it does is it shows a few things to me. It shows that, you're following almost a formula there, aren't you, really? It's saying, okay, I've got to go and I'm going to look at the system, and then I'm going to find a way of sort of gaming that system, getting past that system. You find the vulnerability in the, in the network, really. And I love the way that you applied that to the human side of things as much as you would to an app or whatever, you know, or to some code. You know, you've got the technical and the human side. It all applies right across, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that's one of the things I was trying to do with the book, is to really, as many ways as possible, and this to be on the book, this is what I try to do anytime I'm talking to anybody, is trying to constantly think about how do you describe the ideas in different ways until eventually something clicks for somebody. Because for a lot of people, the technical concepts are really confusing. You know, it's like, what are all these technical terms? What's a buffer overflow?
No.
Like, what are all these things? But if you can conceptualize it like, okay, you're talking to a person and you need the person to give you information. Oh, okay, I can conceptualize that.
Yeah.
And what was interesting, even this particular bar story, as I was preparing it in the writing process, I actually went to a bar. I sat down with, this was pre-COVID. I went and sat down with one of our security analysts. And I was like, what happened here? And so we literally broke down the whole story. And this individual, super smart guy, definitely a resource that I was really happy to lean on through the course of this writing process. He helped me point out like, oh, okay, well, this part is kind of like this other thing. And that was a really fun and collaborative experience to go through, where both of us who really do focus more on the software side of security could say, well, how can we extrapolate this human process and make these things fit together so that they can explain each other. And so, yeah, that's what we're doing.
And I think it's the human side that struck me when you were talking about pen testing and bringing in external experts, and even really when we were talking about, like you say, about that. I love that whole chapter about threats and the different types of threat, and we've got insider threats and we've got external threats, and to do it really well, you need, I was looking over here at my little notes, you need the creativity that comes with being a human. In other words, the tech's all there, but like in the bar example, and like in a lot of the examples in the book, it's the human side of things that just adds, it just gives it that added something that makes it more special, more effective, more suitable for that situation. And I love that coming from someone who I would consider to be a very technical person. I mean, that's a big part of what you were saying as well, right?
I would argue that almost every principle in this book has reliance on the human element. And, you know, because as you know, from having read the book, but I talk about everything from motivations, like what motivates the defender, what motivates the security professional, what motivates the attacker, how is it that our biases get in the way of the way that we think about things? What's the role of assumptions that humans make? Is human error like, is it value judgment that humans make errors? How do we deal with the inevitability that humans make errors? Is it a problem that humans make errors? So I totally agree with you. I mean, this is obviously a very technical topic area, but you can't take the human out of it. And in fact, I argue that you should not take the human out of it. And the security approaches that try to are very bad. The ones that are just like, oh, we'll just run a tool and security solved. It's like, no.
Yeah, because you say that, you say mistakes are good. And like even citing things like Ted says in the book, you know, like at school when you're sort of even punished for making mistakes, when really our mindset when we're adults is more, no, we learn from those. And I think if we take that school teacher mentality that mistakes bad, you know, bad mistakes, then we can never learn from it. And I thought that was a really good point that you made. Sort of throughout it really is that where's the learning curve if we don't point them out and learn from it. And not only that, from a user perspective, from a security perspective, it's really important that people can make mistakes in a sort of safe way so that we can
100%.
plug them as security, you know, we can plug them and patch them as security professionals, isn't it?
Yeah, they're going to happen. Mistakes, they exist. Security vulnerabilities exist. And that's not saying that the person or group or team that caused that vulnerability to exist. It's not to say they're stupid or bad people or incapable or incompetent or anything like that.
Like a teacher in a school might. Yeah.
Right. And so, yeah, you in school, you get punished. You get a literal score. And if the score isn't good, then you feel bad. Your parents get mad at you. Opportunities become limited. You can't get into as good of colleges or whatever. And now you look at the way that security works. And a lot of that same thinking and nomenclature even carries over all the
Yeah.
time. You probably hear this too. People are like, well, we're looking for a report so that we can show we have a clean bill of health. We want to get like the A+ so we can show our customers. And it's like, that's really not what you're going for here. You're going to have issues. What you want to do is identify them, understand how to fix them, and then use your pursuit of excellence. That's the thing you show your customer. Not that you don't have issues, but that you're rigorous in the way that you deal with your mistakes. That's the key point that people need to understand.
Yeah, because everything's hackable, as you're saying, because everything goes wrong, and if we're blind to that, we don't admit that. I don't think it's taken us anywhere. I also, you just mentioned then about the idea of insecurity in the industry, and this sort of struck me about the industry where you said about running tools and that was okay. And one of the things that you said, and obviously this resonated with me as well, was you said in the book something like, you, security expertise takes experience, hard learned in the field. I mean, stuff that you can't learn in a classroom, and that should be valuable. I think I said extensive experience outside the classroom, time, effort, and money, including extensive experience outside the classroom. And I thought to myself, God, isn't that the damn truth? Like, the amount. I think we have a problem with that in the industry, because I think the industry is always trying to. Is always promising silver bullets to clients and customers that aren't there. This is hard slog to get this right.
There's so much wrong with the expectations of what a security professional is and isn't. I think a lot of the problems actually come from the organizations who are looking to hire security professionals, and they're like, we want an entry-level person who has 7 years experience, knows 5 languages, can operate these 15 different tools, has 3 certs, and you're like, hold on, you said entry level, and then you listed someone with all this experience. So that happens, all the time.
Yeah.
But then within the industry too, there is some element of it, and I think this is not the majority of it, hopefully, but there is some element of it who is a little snake oily. There's all kinds of marketing claims of like, yeah, buy this thing and your problems go away. But I don't really identify them as part of the security community. They're more like they're marketers in the security community. But we think of real like security professionals, they're all defined by what you just described. They're passionate about learning, hands-on, whether it's in classroom or outside the classroom. And how I came to write about that particular point you brought up was I sat down with a bunch of my security analysts and I said, talk me through your experience, like from when you started in high school, college, after college. And that was the common theme. They're like, look, it's hard. Most schools don't even have much security education. Maybe they have a club, or maybe there's like one class on it. But even if there is a security degree program, you still need to go get all this experience outside the classroom in order to really be able to be effective. And yeah, that's a big reason why there's this sort of shortage of security talent.
And yeah, I'm talking to you now, and you seem like a sensible enough guy and someone who's measured. so, one more anecdote before we kind of leave this, and I recommend this book highly to everyone in case you hadn't realised already. But you have somebody who deals with risk, and yet you went and did the bull run in Spain.
Oh, yeah.
And I love the way you kind of go, okay, do you know what I felt with this? I'm going to let you tell the story. But what I felt like this was like, you put yourself in this position, and God damn it, this is a risky thing. I'm gonna tell this story and relate it to security because it works very well. Go on, it does. But it just made me. I was like, this. If I almost had a vision of you in that situation, going, if I ever get out of this, I'm definitely using this in a talk. I would.
Yeah, certainly. It is a story of risk, no doubt, and it was kind of dumb in hindsight. But I learned from it, as is the theme today. You learn from your mistakes.
What made you want to go and do the bull run? It's in Pamplona, right?
Yeah, it's every summer in Pamplona. Yeah, it's the running of the Bulls Festival. And I think it was more happenstance really than anything. I was going on this trip to Europe with my best friend from growing up, and we just so happened to, like, he'd never been to Spain. And so I was like, oh, let's go to Spain. And now we're in Spain, and we were looking at we're like, oh, the running of the Bulls is like tomorrow. Should we go? And so we just, we head down to Pamplona and we, get some like really crappy little hotel room. And the next morning there's a part of the story that I didn't tell in the book, which was that the day before we did the run, there's a few days of it. You could pay to go into someone's house that's on the route. And so you can look at the thing happening. So we're like, oh, let's do that. We'll pay, we'll go in this house so we can like game plan what this thing's going to be.
That's awesome.
So
That's
like
so entrepreneurial from the like people who just, I should do that.
Yeah.
You know, my mum could have done that in Liverpool whenever there was anything on in Liverpool. She could have, anyway. Yeah, go on.
Should have. Yeah. I mean, it's like, $10 or 10 euros.
If you got a hustle, you got a hustle. Yeah.
I mean, you have to have weird random strangers in your house, but that's fine. And so we look down at the race and we see the run go by, and we see this one guy just get absolutely destroyed by this bull. He didn't get gored. There was no blood, but the bull was like kicking his butt.
That would be horrible.
And we're like, so we'll do that tomorrow. And so we go down the next day, and it's a really cool experience. And even though it was like physically it was probably a little unsafe, it was a life experience for sure. And you're in this, huge crowd of people. Everyone's wearing their white outfits with like a red sash, and most people are drunk. It's just this really fun environment. And then these rockets shoot off. And then a moment later, after you hear the rockets shoot off, the rockets are the bulls leaving their pen. And then maybe a minute later, you see these bulls come around the corner. So I'm looking down this like super narrow alley, and there's maybe, I don't know how many, there were 6 or 8 bulls charging right at us. And in the moment, I'm like, I chose to be here. I did this on my own.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I'm like, all right, well, the bull's coming. I'll go get out of the way. And so I sort of jog over to, there's a fence on the side. I start climbing the fence to safety so you can be above where the bulls are going to run. And then these sort of 2 things alerted me that something was up. First thing was that friend of mine who I'd done this with, he was smarter than me. He was already on top of the fence, and he has this just sheer look of terror on his face as he's looking back at me, seeing the bull behind me. And I'm like, I thought that bull was like way behind me. And then instantly this bull just like whoosh right under me. And this bull was going for me. He was like rocking his head up at me and everything. And it was a pretty close call. And the sort of metaphor that I draw out of that in the book is about how I had really misjudged my situation. There were things I knew about the bull. I knew the bull had horns, and I knew the bull was really big.
I'm pissed
But
off.
I didn't know that the bull was fast. And that's one of the bulls, like, it doesn't matter how fast I am relative to humans. I'm really slow compared to them. Those things are so fast.
Oh, no.
And so that was the sort of comparison I'm drawing, is that a lot of companies, when they think about their security program, they don't necessarily even understand the alley that they're in with the bull running at them. They don't necessarily understand the bull's strengths. And that's where threat modeling comes in, because what you're trying to do is trying to understand what are the strengths of your opponent? What are your own strengths and weaknesses? Like, again, my speed doesn't matter because this bull's a lot faster than me.
It just reminds me of that joke, though, that you didn't have to, your mate must have thought, I don't have to outrun the bull. I just have to outrun Ted.
Yeah. He probably did think that, actually. Oh, man. But yeah, so that was sort of what I drew out of it, was the metaphor of understanding what you're up against. And when you skip your threat model, it's sort of like walking into that narrow alley, not realizing the situation that you're in, which is exactly the mistake that I made. And so my hope is like, okay, well, let me show you this ridiculous story that actually happened and sort of extrapolate the lessons for what other organizations should do.
I thought it was great. I thought it was an absolutely cracking anecdote and a great story. And it, like I say, it's like, well, it's also this bull's kind of clambering into you. You know what? If I get out of this, it's a bit like security. And I just thought that was great. Well, Ted, look, for me, I mean, there it is again. We'll be flashing up. Look, if I can do it, just the way. If we can flash this up, we'll flash about how to get hold of it. Where can we find out more about you and follow you and everything, so that we can show people?
Yeah, probably the easiest would just be to go to hackablebook.com. Anything that we talk about today, you could access there. So if people want to follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter, that information's there. If you want to know more about the book or buy the book, you can do that there. If you want to reach out to me to see if your software security problems, if we can help you with them through security assessment or whatever, my contact info is there. So
Or you want to get into a
hackablebook.com.
club quickly and you want Ted to look at it in a very, scientific and research solid way, he can do that
Yes,
too.
very scientific.
And advice on bull running.
Yep, exactly.
Well, listen, we will put up all your details up on the podcast, and just I just want to say my favorite quote, but like this is my favorite quote because I am a pen tester. So Ted's book is incredibly quotable, and if you're just starting out in security, I would strongly suggest that you read it. Even if you're in the, you're thinking, oh, I'm not into app security, I'm not into that side of it. You can see how even this discussion, the way that it kind of weaves it all together so well, and I really did love it. And favorite quote: proper penetration testing is badass. It pits a skilled expert against your defenses in a win or die mission. Love that. I was like, yes, thank you, Ted. I wish I'd thought of that. Maybe that should be on my website, win or die mission. So it's great. And we're going to put, highly recommend everyone to follow Ted Harrington. We'll put up everything, all the ways that you can do that. But, Ted, really great achievement. Love the book. And it's so much fun talking to you, mate. It really is. Really good. I wish you every success with it. It was brilliant achievement.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed our time together.
Yeah, it's been awesome. So thanks so much for now to Ted Harrington for being a guest on the Human Factor Security Podcast.